Hello and welcome to Eyes Wide Open with me, your host, Lawrence Easman. Joining me today is a guy who I've been in the trenches with for over 10 years, known to some as the public detective, but known to me as the irrepressible Danny Bamping. Danny is a filmmaker, toymaker, Dragon's Den entrepreneur, and a justice activist with a degree in law. Danny's main passion is his role as a thorn in the side of the corrupt legal establishment and Plymouth City Council by, among other things, refusing to pay 15 parking tickets, refusal to pay council tax since 2009, and only paying £1 a month for his mortgage over the last 10 years. Today, Danny is going to tell us how he used this experience and legal qualification to challenge Plymouth City Council's attempts to erase our history, culture, and heritage on behalf of the Marxist agitators, Black Lives Matter. Danny, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Loz. It's great to see you. Great to
So
be
how
here.
have you been, Dan?
I've been good. Been busy. Very busy. Thanks for the introduction.
No problem. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on and chat with you. I mean, we've been causing trouble for the last 10 years in various areas, whether that be the mortgage or whether that be the council tax area. You know, we've been challenging what we believe is the council's authority to be able to charge us, is bad law by the government, is the scam of the bankers and the mortgage. And, you know, what are your thoughts on that as a general idea?
Well, I think it's quite interesting, obviously, because I've been doing it obviously you did it as well to a certain extent. And I think this is the thing, is that I've kept it going because it only affects me, because I live in this house with 2 cats and that's it. It doesn't affect my daughter, Scarlett, is 12. She lives with her mum, and there's no one else other than it can affect. So not paying your water bill, TV license, and council tax and the mortgage thing is quite scary for some, but for me, it's pushing them as far as you can take them and seeing what happens. Like water is a good example. The only thing that can possibly happen to you with water is that they can affect your credit rating. Really, I mean, that's it. They can get a CCJ. Yeah, they can get a charge against the house, but they're never going to get enough to be able to read.
You can't switch it off, can they?
They can't switch it off. It's a human right. Yeah. Same with the gas and electric. There's ways around these things. There's always a remedy in the legislation, as you know. So you've got to find it.
Well, I'd like to pick up those individual stories in another podcast at a later date, because those in themselves are really interesting, really fascinating, and in the public interest, I think, for people to know what the rights are, how to enforce them, and the general scam that we're all facing. Yeah. But today I want to focus on your new struggle, your latest struggle, which is challenging Plymouth City Council's decision to change the name of a square in Plymouth, Sir John Hawkins Square, upon the threats and intimidation of BLM. Mm-hmm. Now, I guess this story begins with the death of George Floyd in America, among other insane things caused by that mass hysteria. Mm-hmm. I believe Cosmic Cafe in Plymouth started a petition to have the statue of Plymouth's most famous son, Sir Francis Drake, removed. And the pressure from this group of Marxist agitators using BLM as camouflage is revealed in emails between Plymouth City Council released by a Freedom of Information request. Can you give us more details about those specific events and how you got involved with this?
Well, I mean, it's been a mad journey since early June last year, really, when it all started. But ultimately, Plymouth City Council had this knee-jerk reaction to George Floyd's death in 22nd of May, 2020. And then in early June that year, a couple of weeks later, you suddenly had these petitions going up about, like, as you say, about Drake's statue and him being a slave trader. And then you had the Cosmic Cafe putting up graffiti up and around Sir John Hawkins Square signs. And then you had BML kind of threatening to do stuff in Plymouth and having marches and stuff. And because it was a Labour council, it's not now, which is even more interesting, but because at the time it was a Labour council, they just followed suit. They just basically said, okay, we'll do whatever you want. We're woke, we're left wing, and we're gonna appease you, even though you're the absolute small minority of people. We're gonna try and appease you. And what they did was, at the same time all this stuff came out with Black Lives Matter, and obviously it reared its ugly head again, you had this story of this Plymouth footballer, Jack Leslie, who allegedly, even though they were in the 4th division, was picked for England and then dropped. And he wrote in his autobiography that it was like they were being racist. But there's no record of it happening. And they just tried to instantly replace the perceived name of a perceived racist, Sir John Hawkins, because he was connected with the slave trade, and replace him with a perceived victim of racism, Jack Leslie.
So before we get to that bit, that's a little bit further down, is that the sequence of events that led up to this were obviously George Floyd's death in America, and then in Plymouth on the 7th of June, I believe, in 2020, BLM held a protest in the streets of Plymouth. Now, after seeing the emails that you got released by the Freedom of Information, it appears that there was a petition before the BLM march, which was making implied threats against the Plymouth City Council and talking about bringing down statues and monuments in Plymouth. And then they bared their teeth via the BLM protest, putting pressure upon the council, the residents and public in general. And interestingly, it was reported in the Herald, the Plymouth Herald, that it was a mostly peaceful protest, mostly peaceful. We've heard that before, because in their words, it was marred after a man was traveling past on his cycle and he was attacked by the mob and suffered facial injuries for allegedly shouting racially offensive remarks. Now, it's not reported what those remarks were or if he even said them. It was just alleged without any reply from this guy. But what is factual is that the BLM mob attacked him physically because allegedly he said some mean words. Now, this is, an implied threat, isn't it, to the city council? It
is, but that guy was convicted of racial abuse.
What was he convicted for? What did he say?
Because he was one of several Royal Marine guys, because we've got a lot of Marines in Plymouth and stuff. You've obviously got the barracks and stuff here and all that kind of stuff. They went up to the Hoe to protect the statue. They thought that these BML protesters were going to bring down just Sir Francis Drake's statue on the Hoe, which has been there for eons and is a big pride of Plymouth. I mean, this is the irony in all of this. You've got everything in Plymouth is Drake this and Drake Ward and Drake Circus Shopping Centre. Even the shopping centre in Plymouth is named after Sir Francis Drake. And what people don't understand is the truth behind Drake and his cousin, which was Sir John Hawkins, is that, yes, they were slave traders, but only after the Queen told them to go and do it and use her boats. I mean, can you imagine in the 15th century if you were instructed by the Queen as a Royal Navy officer to go to Africa and do the opposite of the Barbary slave trade, which had already happened before, and do it in a Queen's boat, and you say, no, I'm not going to do it, they'd chop your head off.
So that's interesting, because I didn't know that little bit of the story, is that he was a Royal Marine, yet he said some mean words, was physically attacked. But he was the one that was arrested,
of course,
charged. Wow.
And convicted. And this is the thing, is that this is how it all switched around, and this is why they said, I mean, when I say they, Plymouth City Council, and they're still saying it now, 525 days later, there's a perceived threat to the signs of Sir John Hawkins Square, which is why we removed them on June the 8th.
Okay, so the protest was on the 7th. This followed the implied threat of the petition. The protest was on the 7th. You had the fight and the altercation on the protest day on the 7th. On the 8th, Plymouth City Council removed the road name for Sir John Hawkins Square.
Yeah, all three
Because
road signs came down for the square.
And this was done because they believed it was going to be attacked and vandalized.
They were going to be vandalized. Yeah, they were going to be vandalized. And the thing is, that's why they're still using that excuse 525 days later to still not have the road signs up to say that there's perceived threat. And the only perceived threat is from Cosmic Cafe, which is actually in the square. And it's obviously the only threat is from BML, woke, left wing. Yeah, BML.
It's not a sofa. It doesn't sell sofas, unfortunately.
So yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Really, where the only
Cosmic Cafe, the cafe that started this whole shebang, they were the catalyst. That's based inside Sir John Hawkins Square. And would you call that cafe progressive? Was it a headquarters for Antifa or anything like that? Tell me about Cosmic Cafe.
I don't want to give them any airtime, to be honest, but all I'll say is that they don't have any real milk. and they're completely woke, left-wing, vegan, all of this mad stuff. And yet they don't understand the history of Sir John Hawkins. They just have gone to Wikipedia, which he is corrected now because it was wrong saying that he was the first English slave trader. He wasn't. It happened a decade before. The Queen.
Okay, before we go any further, let's talk about Sir John Hawkins. Seeing that he is the heir of, their consternation, the person who they want to pull down. Other than being Sir Francis Drake's cousin, treasurer of the Royal Navy, architect of the design of the Navy, a naval commander of the decisive victory against the Spanish Armada, Plymouth MP and philanthropist.
He was.
Yeah, he was allegedly the first slave trader in England. Tell us about him as a historical character and his importance to Plymouth, and whether BLM and Cosmic Cafe have a point.
Well, they don't have a point. They have a misguided perception of they are trying to tie in slave trading with racism. And that's just wrong, because it's not slavery and slave trading was never about race. There's the perception of it. And this is the thing is that Barbary slave trade was people from Africa coming over to nick people from England and Dorset and Devon and Cornwall. So
millions of people. I mean, millions of people were captured by the Barbary slave trade, but that's never brought up by BLM. It's just a certain demographic are the victims, and it's not really about racism or slavery, or it would be about slavery right now with their iPhones being made by literal slaves in China, or the clothes they're wearing being made by literal slaves in China as well. I mean, they don't talk about those things, do they? It's a very narrow definition, and it's a very specific demographic, and anybody else that suffered racism or slavery is not even, considered, which tells me it's not about those things. It's about power.
Yeah, of course, but they're turning it around. They're turning this slavery genre, if you like, into a racist one. That's what it is, and it's mad because when you look at like the first legal slave trader in America was black, and you look at the new presenter of Match of the Day, the lady, I can't remember the name, and she went and did this.
Who do you think you are?
Yeah, who are you?
You got a shock.
She had a big shock, didn't she? Because she discovered that her descendants were slavers and stuff, and they had 28 slaves, and she couldn't get it in her head. And
well, look at under Obama and Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. They, waged an illegal military action against Libya, removed Gaddafi, and as a result, there's now open slave trading in Libya's main city, Tripoli. Sub-Saharan Africans are brought into Libya and literally traded in the open. I mean, why aren't we talking about that as part of, slavery and racism?
Yeah, and if you look if you look at the stats, like, because I Googled it and thought, how many people are in slavery today? And it's like it's literally millions. It really is millions. And it's like, well, why are you worried about what happened 500 years ago? Because
Because they're hypocrites.
Of course, and they're judging actions that happened 500 years ago with today's morals and ethics. And you can't do that. You literally cannot do that. But that's what these people are doing. And this is the thing about, you asked me about Sir John Hawkins. He was Mr. Plymouth. He was, like you said, the MP for Plymouth for years. He was a naval commander. He was in the front of the front ship when the Spanish Armada came. His cousin Drake was finishing off his game of bowls on the Hoe, allegedly. Yeah, but that's a myth, or is it? But it just shows the measure of the man, that he was at the front of the front boat, seeing off the Spanish Armada from their attempted, invasion. And not a lot of people know that. And he set up a naval hospital for people who had been in the Navy and been injured or diseased or whatever. That naval hospital still exists 500 years later. And this is the thing, is we've not got a statue of Sir John Hawkins yet. Yeah. But if Luke Pollard, our Labour MP, can raise 150 grand for one for Nancy Astor, the racist bigot, who was bought into the whole shebang, married into the thing, wasn't even British. I think she was Canadian, and she was a massive racist. And yes, she was an MP for Plymouth, and she was the first woman to take her seat because the Sinn Féin woman who got elected before her refused to take her seat. And this is the thing, is so she's a famous thing in Plymouth, but actually she's far worse than Sir John Hawkins ever was. And that's the only thing we've got really with Hawkins's name on, apart from a silver bollard on the Hoe, which is in the first line of many famous people from Plymouth, including Sir Francis Drake. But the first one is Sir John Hawkins.
So what specifically is the allegation made against Hawkins in order for them to, remove any memory of him in Plymouth?
It's basically because when the slave trade started to occur in the UK, which is like 1546 or something, 10 years later, the Queen at the time, Elizabeth, whatever, second, third, whatever, she said to the Navy and to Francis Drake and to Sir John Hawkins, go. And that's why they became sirs, by the way. That's the other thing. They don't know that she gave them these orders, and they did like 3 slave trading missions to Africa. And, that's it. They stopped. They did it. They did it in the naval boats. Yeah. Can you imagine our Navy going to Africa? Mm-hmm. And that's what they did under the Queen's orders. And if they'd have said no, they would literally have been treason, because you're going against the Queen's wishes. They'd no messing about back then. You would have been off with your head to the gallows or whatever.
Rightfully so, though. Slavery was ended by this country too.
Well, this is the thing, is that what other people don't know is that eventually Sir John Hawkins started to play a part in ending it. I don't think they were comfortable with it. And this is the thing, is that he started the end of it as well. So he should be looked at historically as a very important figure in the UK for what he did at the time he did it, more so than Sir Francis Drake. More so.
Okay. So we've got a bit of the background of the politics that was going on and what's going on still now regarding this issue. So I think it was on the 9th of June. So we have the protest on the 7th. We have the signs being removed on the 8th. And then on the 9th of June, we have Tudor Evans, who was the leader of Plymouth Council. He issued a statement in support and remembrance of George Floyd. And in this statement, Tudor acknowledges that the council were under pressure to remove landmarks in Plymouth relating to Drake and Hawkins. And he concedes that to appease the BLM mob, the council decided to rename John Hawkins Square and decided to already take the signs down, which was the day after the march.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty quick decision for a slow bureaucracy, wasn't it?
Very, very quick.
very quick.
Yeah.
So the acknowledgement by Tudor Evans, which is that the pressure of a political group, BLM, to force a change of a road name in Plymouth. I mean, is that even legal? Because that's like a threat, isn't it? You know, if you don't remove that signs, you're going to face more, trouble from BLM. You're going to face political pressure. I mean, that's an admission that he was compelled or forced or threatened to take action the way he did. What are your thoughts on that? Because the people weren't even consulted at that stage, were they? And it seems that the decision has already been made.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing, is that they literally did it as a knee-jerk reaction to appease the Black Lives Matter protest, the George Floyd death, and all that stuff that occurred after it. And then because Plymouth Labour are left and woke and wanted to be ultra PC, they decided to change the name of the road square. It's been there for 37 years. Nobody said nothing. There's been no complaints until all this kicked off. And I think what's really revealing is not only did they remove the signs on the 8th and then announced it on the 9th, right, we're going to change the name of the roads, but when you look at the emails that were revealed for the FOI, it shows that Christopher Penberthy, who is the councillor for St. Peter on the Waterfront in Plymouth, which is where Sir John Hawkins Square is, he then suggested, hey, let's call it Jack Leslie Square after the Plymouth Argyle footballer. And that's why that was on the 10th, that email. And then the cabinet councillor, Mark Lowry, again, Labour, obviously, because they were in administration and control, he had the power, because he was the transport councillor, to make the decision, a delegated councillor's decision. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because he sent an email to Chris Penberthy and a few others, a lady called Jane Hirons, who's basically in charge of, she's not a councillor, but she's a council worker, and she's in charge of roads and street names and all this stuff and making sure they follow the policy. And so basically, Chris Penberthy suggests Jack Leslie on the 10th, nominates his name as a possibility. And on the 11th, the day after, Mark Lowry, who's got the power to make the decision, emails and says, we should assume from this point on that it will be called Jack Leslie Square. We need to move quickly, Jane.
So that's a concession that the decision had already been made.
That is basically the decision, because he is the only person who has the authority to make the decision. But you need to bear in mind is this. It takes 28 days for an emergency delegated decision to be made by Plymouth City Council. Okay? Mm-hmm. So then we go on.
So either they'd made the decision 28 days previous, or they hadn't complied with the 28 days notice that was required.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or they haven't made a decision at all.
What do you mean? What decision? Okay, before we get there, because that's the juicy bit, isn't it? Right. Okay. So some kind of decision had been made at some level in Plymouth City Council, and then they took it to the next stage, which I imagine is where you got involved, which was a public notice that there was going to be a road name change of Sir John Hawkins Square.
That's correct. But you've got to remember this thing that happened between this all happened between the 8th of June and the 18th of June, because the 18th of June was when the public notice went up in the square. But you've also got to remember
10 days after the signs had been removed.
Exactly. So you've got to remember that, because they're putting notices up in an unnamed square.
Yeah.
Right, which is a bit. We're going to change the name of the square. What square? What was it?
And they removed the names of the square because they'd been threatened by BLM that they were going to be vandalised or whatever else. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you want to look at this, they've been threatened by Labour Party voters.
Okay,
because same thing, right? So exactly. So I think this is the thing: is that what happened next is that the policy, and this is quite important. The policy that the Plymouth City Council has, like every local authority has, about renaming or giving road names that haven't got a name, like new roads with building estates, etc. They have to give these names, these streets and roads names. and they've got a policy that they've got to follow. And it specifically says, if you're going to use the name of a deceased person, then before it becomes a nomination, it becomes an option, before it's even put forward, right, as an option, you need to go to that family and ask for permission to use that name.
So if the person that you're going to change the name to is dead, you've got to get permission by the family, correct?
Yes, correct. But you've got to do it before it becomes a nomination.
Is that not just nitpicking, though? I mean, is that important, or is that...
No, it is. It's important, because think about this, right? What's happened here is they nominated him, Jack Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
They made the decision the day after. Well, that's it. We'll do Jack Leslie. That's perfect. Yeah. And then 3 days after that, on the 15th, yeah, they then write a letter to the family asking for permission. Now, imagine if the family turned around and said no, which they didn't. But imagine if they did. And that's why you've got to ask for permission from any deceased person's family. Can we use this as a nomination? Because you can't do it afterwards, and you can't really do it when they're just about to make the decision saying we want to name it after this person. You need to do it when there's a nomination process, so there's options, so it becomes an option because you've got permission from the family. Now, what's interesting is obviously when all this kicked off, I'm like, look, before I even wrote my letter to the
before we get to that though, so because that's the council issued a notice to the public that complied with certain rules, regulations, and laws. Allegedly that they were going to change the name of the square and give the public an opportunity to object. Correct?
Yes, exactly.
And that's when you came into this story.
Sorry?
Is that when you came into this story?
Yeah, well, I was just involved a little bit before that because I was reading it in the paper and I couldn't understand. So I went on the web and looked on the web, and there's a road next to Plymouth Argyle that's not got a name. Because I'm thinking, why they name it after an Argyle footballer? Sure, there's a road near Argyle, near Home Park, where it could be named. And lo and behold, the actual road that Home Park, Plymouth Argyle's football stadium is on, does not have a name. I mean, you could not make this up. And it hasn't had a name since 2009. So when they built the Life Centre, which is the big swimming pool facilities, sports facilities, next to Home Park and in front of Mayflower Car Park, they had to move the road around and move things around, and then the road became unnamed. So obviously that was one of my points, my appeal, because this is the thing, is that what happened, and this is where I think they were trying to be really sneaky. I think Plymouth City Council didn't want anybody to take this to court. And to avoid that process from happening, what they did was they worded the legal notice that went in the square, and they worded the email that was sent out to several councillors, because a lot of the Conservative councillors were going nuts about it. Yeah. So they wrote to Linda Tawney, who's the monitoring officer and assistant legal chief executive, kind of assistant second in command legally in a way for the council, and the monitoring officer, which is a really important position. And basically she wrote, if anybody wants to object, they need to write a letter of objection to the court. It's really important, that is, because the notice said it as well. And what it should have said, need to write a letter of appeal to the court.
Okay.
So 55 people, me included in that 55, all wrote letters to Plymouth Magistrates Court. And because...
Objecting.
Well, 54 did.
Okay.
54 objected. One stood out like a sore thumb, because I read the 1925 Section 18 Public Health Act, and it said appeal. And from my law background, wording is key. So I put the word appeal in my letter, which is why the court didn't throw it out. They threw out...
Couldn't you say that it's a faulty notice then?
Of course. It's a faulty notice. It's a void notice. And not only that, it was deliberate. Because imagine...
Okay, so let's just sum that up. So Plymouth City Council worded the notice that said,
and, and the email.
If anyone objects, contact us. Whereas
all they did is they wrote and said anybody objects, they need to write a letter to the court objecting against the decision. Right.
Yeah.
And they wrote that. Nobody saw the legal notice in Sir John Hawkins Square. Nobody stood there and read it on the post. Yeah. What happened is on email is that a couple of councillors got hold of Linda Tawney. She drafted her own little reply letter of objection to the court. So everybody, and then that got distributed, like posted on Facebook. Right. Yeah. That's how distributed it became by councillors on the other side. They were posting it on Facebook. They were sharing it. I got it on email, from a councillor saying, Danny, you've got to write a letter. And I'm like, letter of objection. That doesn't sit right with me. Let's have a look at the legislation. What does it say? And it says letter of, we've got a right to a letter of appeal. So
the law states appeal and the council stated objection. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's 53 people put in a letter of objection, but yours was the only
54.
letter of appeal. 54.
Yeah, and mine was the only one that went through the net. Yeah. Wow. So they caught everybody because they deliberately didn't want. Imagine if I just put an objection. Yeah, all of the letters would have been rejected. There would have been no court case, and right now it would be called Jack Leslie Square, without doubt. And no one would know what we know now, which is even more madder. Right. Yeah. So this is the thing: is that they deliberately tried to avert and avoid having a court hearing because they knew they'd messed up. And of all people, me, the person that's not paid council tax for over a decade.
The only one to slip the net.
Exactly. And then this is the thing is that then I started to get attacked. And then hold
on a minute. So you're the only man standing. You're the last man standing in this process. Yeah. So what happens then? So your letter of appeal is accepted by the magistrates court. There's a hearing granted. Is that what happened next?
Yeah, but I had to pay a fee, which I crowdfunded in an hour.
I've noticed that in the press. The press actually stated in multiple articles that Mr. Bamping crowdfunded the fee of 60 quid.
It took me an hour. Yeah.
I mean, they're saying it condescendingly, not really knowing that it was a good troll by you.
I mean, it made sense. I didn't even have 60 quid, to be honest. So I thought, fuck it, I've got no choice.
Yeah.
So, and then all the support came in. So at first I got attacked. And then as soon as the appeal started to go through, they started to get worried.
Who did you get attacked by, Dan?
I used to get trolled on the internet. I used to get messages. Used to get some mad phone calls as well, which is thankfully
Is this by BLM, do you think? And
absolutely.
In Plymouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is the thing is that I just kept at it, and it went to court, and then it got really interesting. And this is the thing is that as a self-litigant in front of a district judge about such a conscientious subject, if you like, very topical in the news and all that stuff, they weren't happy with having this hearing. The judge wasn't happy, the court wasn't happy, and the council weren't happy. But 6 out of 7 dwarves aren't happy either. So it was just
what was the main thrust? What was the main thrust of your argument in this case? Because I did read somewhere that it was the judge said the burden of proof is with you to prove that the council are wrong. That doesn't sound right. It sounds like it should be the other way. It should be the burden of proof is with the council to prove they're right.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing, and that's what happened in court, is that District Judge Matson tried to turn the whole thing around. So much so that when I went in on September the 11th, 2020, for the case management hearing, she gave the council the opportunity to do the bundle. So if I was like the CPS and you were like trying to convict a murderer, the CPS are not going to go, do you want to do the bundle? Do you want to do the evidence bundle? Yeah, you're the defendant, but we'll let you do the bundle. That's insane. I raised a big flag in court. She threatened me with contempt of court. I said, hold on a minute. It's a civil hearing. It's my appeal. I'm not being rude. I'm raising a point of law, and you're threatening me with contempt of court. And she shut up. And District Judge Matson, it gets really interesting. I don't mind disclosing this at all, because that lady, that judge, that public servant, is not right. I mean, when I say she's not right, she's not right. The cases that she's heard over, when you Google them, are insane. Like, I'll give you an example. She's heard over a case where an ex-police officer assaulted 2 women on a police night out, and these 2 women went to the police individually, right? Didn't even know that the other one was making the complaint against the same guy. It goes to court, and District Judge Matson says, oh, because the guy said in the dock, I didn't fancy the women. And so she said, because you didn't fancy them, I'll let you off with a warning. What's that got to do with it?
District judges, though, they are the very lowest rung of the judicial hierarchy. They're normally hacks, untalented lawyers, people looking for an easy job. But unfortunately, the dispensing, supposed justice causing a lot of people a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Okay. So
we're going to the hearing, and basically, I'm saying to the judge, right, I want Councillor Chaz Singh, my local independent, hard-working councillor, the man with the turban, brilliant guy, and Nick Kelly, who is the leader of the Conservatives, who also was one of the 54 letters that got rejected, and that's the other thing that. So I wanted those as witnesses in the hearing, and the judge just went, no, you're not having them.
But didn't Nick Kelly float the idea to the council that it should be a shortlist and a public vote upon who the name change should be, but it was voted down by the Labour Party?
Yeah, he filed a motion on the 10th. As soon as it was announced on the 9th by Tudor Evans, he filed with Linda Tawney, very important, right, a motion for the meeting to be held on the 22nd of June 2020 to do exactly that, to have a debate, to allow the public to have 3 or 4 choices, one of them to remain as Sir John Hawkins Square. Yeah, that was debated for about 5 minutes in that meeting on the 22nd, and then it was brought to a vote immediately. So they stopped the debate, brought it to the vote, Labour had the majority, and so Labour just wiped the floor with it and kicked it out. And that's really important, because Nick was trying to be democratic. Yeah. And Nick
put it to the people.
Yeah, of course. And Nick came to every hearing. I mean, Nick Kelly came to every hearing. Okay. And he was there. And he talked to Matson at one point. In fact, 2 hearings, Matson referred to him, because obviously he was there when I wanted him as a witness. And there was a conversation between Nick and Judge Matson in the courtroom.
So the council have not brought the case. The council have made their position. They believe that the law supports them in changing the name of the road. They give you the opportunity to appeal. You've appealed. You're in court. It's a hearing with Judge Matson, District Judge Matson. What are the grounds of your appeal, and what is the thrust of your argument to say that the council can't do it?
My first point is your ultra virus, because Section 18 of the Public Health Act 1925 states alteration of an existing street name. Alteration. Doesn't say change.
What do you mean states that they can only alter the street name rather than change? I mean, is that the law that the council were using?
Yeah. Section 18, 1925 Public Health Act states alteration of an existing street name.
Yeah.
You can only alter an existing street name. You can't change or rename it. It doesn't say that in the legislation. And it's really important, the wording, because this was written in 1925. And this is at a time when they were still drawing maps with an ink pen. Yeah, and all that cartography was going on. They knew that they didn't want to have to or be able to change the names of roads, because once they've named them, like Pall Mall, right, in London, would you change that name?
You've got to change monopoly boards. You've got to change GPS. You've got to change maps all over the world. Yeah, I get that. But do you think that most people would understand alter to mean change? Would you think it's like splitting hairs here, or do you think it's the specific definition of altered is really important here?
It's massively important. It was specifically chosen. It was specifically used in that legislation in 1925, so that if you wanted to alter the name of Sir John Hawkins Square, you could alter it by dropping the Sir John. And then it would just become Hawkins Square, which is what the majority of people in Plymouth call it anyway.
But road names are changed, aren't they? As you well know, because you've got form in this area, haven't you? Because that's a little bit of background that got revealed as part of this case. Is that you weren't just coming at this as some enthusiastic amateur. You're actually an experienced and professional road name changer. Give us the background on that, because I think it's important. Is what you're saying is that they can't change the name of the road; they can only alter it. But yet you personally have been involved in a road name change previous.
That's true. And this is the thing, is that it's weird when you look at a legislation. I never looked at it the first time. That was the council's job. I wasn't involved with that process. I just made the original complaint. And what happened is, in around 2017, there's a chap in Plymouth who was really well respected, well known. He was the chief executive of Great Western Railways. He was the chairman of the board of commerce in Plymouth. He was all sorts of things. He was on all sorts of boards, big property development firms. And years ago, Charles Howson, that's his name, he owned a bit of land on the edge of a roundabout near the hospital, and he donated it to the council. And as a kind of kickback and a thank you, the council named the road that went through it down to the Jack Rabbit pub, past the Mercedes garage and the Holiday Inn. Basically, they named it Howson Lane. But what also happened in 2017 is that Charles Howson was convicted of sexual offences against young boys in the Navy, which is something that the UK column and Brian Gerrish covered a lot at the time, because I think Brian was in the Navy with Charles Howson and he knew about his behaviour. And so this is the thing, is that all of a sudden, when Charles Howson got convicted and put in jail for 8 years in Dartmoor, suddenly Plymouth had a road named after a sexual convicted criminal. And basically I made a complaint. I mean, it's much like Savile Row. Yeah, or all the roads up in North Yorkshire and stuff, in Leeds and stuff, were named after Jimmy Savile. Lots of those had to be changed.
But what are the grounds for changing them if altered is not the
this is the thing.
way to do it?
Imagine this: in nearly 100 years, 1925, nearly 100 years, 96 years, no one has ever realised that the local authorities and the city councils do not have the power under Section 18 to change or rename an existing road name. They can only alter it. And the definition, which we briefly mentioned, the definition of alteration is that you can change something a small bit, but it must keep its identity. And Mike, my daughter Scarlett came to me and said, "Danny, can you alter my dress?" I was like, "Say that again." I thought he said, "Can you alter my address?" Which would have been even more weird. But I altered her address and tucked it up at the hem and cut a bit off at the sleeve and stuff. Same dress, yeah, but I made an alteration to it so it fitted better. And that's what this is all about. And that's why there's cases.
What you're saying is that road name change that you were involved with was
illegal.
Illegal.
Absolutely. But I just suggested it because it was named after Charles Howson, and nobody in Plymouth wants a road named after a sexual offender.
Of course. So there are situations, there are grounds, there are times when a road name change is important.
Yeah, but you can't do it under the legislation.
Okay.
And this is the thing about my case. District Judge Matson, would not allow me to talk about the word alteration in court. She would not talk about it at all. I filed in the bundle Black's Law Dictionary definition of the word alteration from 1910. And I also found some case law, which was really interesting, which was a property case or property firm in London bought this, what do they call it when they're protected? Grade 2 listed property in London. And it said you can make alterations to the building, right, in the deed. So they took the council to court, having bought this building from the council, and said, we want to demolish the building. And so they had to have a ruling in the High Court. Does alteration mean change completely? Yeah. And they came back and said, no, you can like knock down a window. You can knock down that extension that was built onto the building 10 years after it was protected. All this stuff. That's an alteration. You can't knock the building down. It's protected. That's the point.
Yeah.
And that's, if you think about it, and I did a freedom of information request. In fact, I asked Jane Hirons, one of the witnesses in the case, sent her an email. Jane, can you give me a list of all the people you've got to notify when you change a road name? And the list was just massive. It's like 36 different organisations and then some. And
so it's a major endeavour, isn't it?
Exactly. And it took them 3.5 years to change House and Lane to Bracken Lane. It took them 10 days to change Sir John Hawkins Square, or try to Jack Leslie Square.
Which could imply that this was a decision made a lot earlier, or it was knee-jerk due to the situation.
Knee-jerk reaction. And then when we go to court and we go to the trial on November the 13th, Friday the 13th, I've got no witnesses. I cross-examined the two witnesses on the stand, Chris Penberthy, the councillor, and Jane Hirons. When was the decision made? I don't recall. Who made the decision? I don't recall. Could the decision be classed as racist? I don't think so. Did you rename the square Jack Leslie Square because he's BAME? No. And yet the email from Chris Penberthy that I got after the hearing on the 10th of June states, let's use Jack Leslie because he's BAME. It says it in the email.
Mm-hmm.
And so
the thrust of your argument then is that the council couldn't use the legislation, which is the 1925 Act regarding alteration, one. Yeah. Two, that you believe that naming Jack Leslie in this particular circumstance, in this particular square, was racist because, they're only choosing him because of the colour of his skin.
Basically, rather than, but that's in the policy. It says it can't be considered racist in their policy. So I had to prove, like Matson said, swung it around I was making the claim, so therefore the burden of proof was on me. Yeah. I had to prove that their decision was wrong, and it was, but because it didn't follow their policy, and it could be considered racist, and they didn't get permission from Jack Leslie's family in time because he was nominated on the 10th, and Chris Penberthy, they didn't go to them until the 15th, by which time they'd already made the decision. So this is where it starts to fall apart for the council. But in the courtroom, Matson was so biased, it was unreal.
Yeah.
It was, she didn't, I might wave in a flag. Where's the actual decision, Your Honour? Where is it supposed to be evidenced? This is the thing.
So explain that. When you say the decision, do you mean the decision made by the chief executive of Plymouth Council or the leader of the council, which says we are changing this road name to this road name, and it's as a written document? Is that what you're talking about? Because it seems the decision is quite important to your case.
Of course, that's the whole point of my case. My appeal was against their decision.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm appealing their decision, and I'm in court at the hearing on November the 13th saying, where is it? And in the Communities Act, Local Communities Act 1976, Section 42, Miscellaneous Provisions Act, it says, if a member of the public appeals any decision is the wording, not just delegated, which is this one was, any decision by a local authority or city council, that decision must be evidenced in court, in writing. It says it there in the legislation. And that's because all council's decisions are published on their website. And this wasn't a decision by the leader, Tudor Evans. It wasn't a decision by Tracy Lee, the CEO. This was a decision by Mark Lowry, Councillor Mark Lowry, who was in the position of cabinet member for transport. And under that role, he has the power to make that delegated decision. And as I said earlier, emergency delegated decisions have to follow a process. There's a graph, there's a chart on Plymouth City Council's website, and they must follow this, and it gets signed off here, and it gets signed off here, and it goes there, blah, 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 then it's done. The minimum time you can do a delegated decision is 28 days, right? They put that legal notice on in the square on the 18th, 9 days, or actually 8 days, after Mark Lowry made the decision on the 11th.
So why don't you think they're prepared to produce the decision? I mean, because you've appealed a decision that doesn't exist and you've lost. I mean, yeah, so how does that work? I mean, what are your thoughts? Because they're hiding something, aren't they? I mean, why wouldn't they present the decision? Because they're confident about, the law and because them being right and correct. I mean, why wouldn't they bring that to court?
Well, because I was waving a flag, and obviously, like you say, the judgment gets brought down on the 4th of December, 18-page written judgment. In that, Judge Matson never mentions the decision that the whole case was about. She just says that I failed to prove that their decision was wrong, even though the decision wasn't even on the table. Right? And yes, I raised this alteration argument, which was great, and she refused to talk about it in court and said it was semantics. And then when I appeal the decision, the only point of appeal she allows me is on the alteration argument. Literally the only point. Yeah? And yet she has to come back to me for this case-stated drafted appeal to go to the High Court. These are the questions. So I go to her with 8 questions. She comes back with 4, but 3 of hers are made up, her own, and comes back with 1, which is reworded in such a way that I would have probably lost, because she worded it in such a way it got round the actual point that the legislation was making, right? So I then redrafted those questions and went back to her, because that's what you're allowed to do under the legislation.
You're allowed to do what? Explain that.
So I go to the court with my case-stated appeal. The judge then either disallows it and it rejects it.
So this is a second appeal. The first appeal was against the council.
This is appeal against
District Judge Matson has rejected based upon the planks of your argument, and then you get an opportunity to appeal that decision.
Yeah, via way of case-stated. Points of law via way of case-stated. And I go to her with these 7 or 8 drafted questions, and she comes back to me with 4. Well, 3 of them are just bullshit, if you want to use that phrase, because that's what they were. And the other one is the redrafted key question about the use of the word alteration. So the other questions that I'd raised is, where's the decision?
Yeah.
You're in breach of the council, though, are in breach of the Local Communities Act, 1976, Legislation Provisions Act, Section 42. Here it is. She ignored it.
But why do you think do you think they just lost the decision? Do you think it's incompetence, or do you think they're deliberately trying to hide something? And if so, what is it that they could be trying to hide that would incriminate their position?
Well, this is the thing. How could she make a decision against an appeal that is against the decision when the decision's not on the table? And when the council,
what if it's a verbal decision that didn't exist in writing?
It's got to exist in writing as per that legislation. Any member of the public.
What if it doesn't, though? I mean, what's the remedy?
Well, the thing is, that's what it does. It does. I found it in the FOI. It's the Mark Lowry email on the 11th. But the thing is, Loz, what they're supposed to do after that is go through that process of that diagram and have it properly recorded and signed off and documented. So at the end, they've got this document that said this decision was made on this date by this person as a delegated decision. It's been through all the process, and here it is, and they publish it on their website. You go to Plymouth City Council's website, you can find every decision that they made yesterday, and it'll be published.
Yeah, but back to the question is, okay, then it's either incompetence, which is likely, which is extremely likely when dealing with local councils, or it's deliberate, right? And I think considering the background of this particular case and the events leading up to it, I think there's a reasonable suspicion that it may be deliberate, yeah? And if it is deliberate, what are they hiding, and why are they hiding it? Because
they're hiding.
What evidence could they produce that they're hiding that would change your argument? That
Nothing.
would give you a winning hand.
Oh, well, I've already got it now. I'm there. I've got it. I found it. It was like looking. I had to search through there for a while. Through their email.
For the decision, you found the decision.
Yeah, the decision is the email on the 11th by Mark Lowry.
Yeah.
But which shows that they breached their policy.
I see. So that's the incriminating evidence.
There you go. So imagine that they realise when I've slipped through the net, they didn't think that someone would slip through their net. That was the point where they messed up, because I slipped through the net. The court case happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's on the record.
Sorry?
Now it's on the record, isn't it?
Now it's on the record, and I'm waving a flag. Where's the decision? They didn't then follow through with the process to make the delegated decision. Because
so that decision that you found exposes that they in breach of their policy. Why is being in breach of their policy important?
Because if a council, the Supreme Court case law, that if a council fails to follow its policy, then the decision itself is null and void. Ab initio. Void ab initio. Because it was breached their policy, it's not a decision. It's broken their policy. It doesn't have no legal effect. So
therefore, no decision has been made to change Sir John Hawkins Square to Jack Leslie Square, correct?
We've only just found that out, but correct, yeah. And because I thought the decision was Mark Lowry's decision, and it was, and that's why they didn't evidence it, because it breached their policy. So I would have won in the magistrates' court. But it turns out that they realised that they
deliberately withheld evidence.
They deliberately didn't follow through with making the delegated decision and signing it off properly, because it had already gone to court by then, and they realised that they were in breach of their policy.
Couldn't you have asked for that as part of disclosure?
I did.
You did.
Who was in charge of the bundle? Was I in charge of the bundle?
Okay.
Right, you see how that
works? So remind us again about that part of the story, because now it falls into place.
Yeah, because
District Judge Matson instructed the council's barrister to put the bundle together of the evidence, of which was part of your request for disclosure, that the council produced the evidence you requested for the hearing to be conducted. Yeah. Where is the decision?
Yeah, they sent it to me 2 days before the hearing, which was a breach of the rules. And then I emailed back to Linda Tawney and said, I don't agree with this. Where's the decision? and then she didn't reply. And then I get a hard copy.
You're back. Yeah, I lost you for a moment then.
Okay.
Okay, where were we then? Just
basically, they served me 2 days before with this bundle. No decision in it. I go back and say, I don't agree to this bundle. It's got no the decision. Where's the decision? They don't reply to me. I go to the day before court, and then process served at my door with, here's the bundle. Well, I don't agree with it. Well, tough. I go to court, I'll say, Judge Matson, I don't agree with the bundle. It's too late, Mr. Bamping. We're just got to carry on. Well, hold on a minute. I'm appealing the decision, and it's not in here. How am I supposed to analyse whether they followed their policy if it's not in here? Oh, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you carry on, Mr. Bamping, I'll do you for contempt of court.
Yeah. If you challenge me, Mr. Bamping, I'm going to get you locked up. What kind of bullshit's that? Okay, so it's getting quite tasty, the case, isn't it, really? So we've had the appeal to the council's decision. That's gone against you. You've now appealed District Judge Matson's decision via the case stated in the magistrates' court. What date is this? Where are we up to in the timeline, roughly?
Well, I think it's important to know that when she made the judgment, because she reserved her judgment, obviously she wasn't going to make it on the day, but when she reserved her judgment to the 4th of December, that hearing, 4th of December was really funny, because basically we turned up at court and she then read out of 18-page judgment, read it out, word for word, right? So then at the end of that process, she says, you've lost, Mr. Bamping, you've got to pay the council costs. So let's go through your financial situation, shall we? What should we do first? Incomings or outgoings? let's do your outgoings every month, shall we do, Mr. Bamping? And bear in mind, I'm in a public courtroom. I've got the lady from the BBC, political reporter for Spotlight. I've got Ed Oldfield from Reach PLC for Plymouth Live. I've got loads of people there, Jane Hirons, Nick Kelly, Chaz. There's loads of people in the courtroom, right? And she says, how much is your mortgage? And I say,
£1 a month.
It's £1 a month, Your Honour. And then we go into this whole discussion about why is it £1 a month? So I have to go, well, I had a possession hearing and then I appealed it and I went in front of Judge Cotter, who found Theresa May to be in contempt of court. And you like him because he does people for contempt. And then said, and then Judge Cotter agreed with me because I asked the Halifax, who were trying to repossess my house, where's the contract that you claim that there's in the claim form that they'd written to get the possession order. And Cotter agreed with me that they breached the rules by claiming...
Another story for another time. We'll go down the mortgage on another day.
So we go through that. How much is your water bill? I don't pay for rain, Your Honour. I've not paid for rain for 15 years. How much is your council tax? I don't fund these criminals. That's what I said. That's what I said.
Classic.
Right? How much is your gas? I pay on a key meter. No. How much is your electricity? I pay on a key meter. How much is your gas? It's free. Why is it free? Because I've got a smart meter. Why is it free? Because it's not that smart, because it's not connected to my bank account. And then she says, what did she say? What about your TV license? I don't fund paedophiles. Right, that's what I said. Right, and she said, right, okay, I think...
She asked.
I know. This is where we get to. Right, let's go through your incomings. How much do you earn every month as managing director of Turton Retail Systems Limited, your father's label business, which is here? Yeah. £460 a month, Your Honour. And she went, that's £115 a week. I said, I know. She said, why do you only get paid £115 a week? I said, because if I pay myself £118, I have to pay PAYE and national insurance. And then she said, how do you pay your bills? We've just been through that. I haven't got any.
Brilliant. But she still hit you with a big fine, didn't she?
8.5 grand. And
okay, so there's an important point to bring. There's an important point to bring up here, because when I was reading about your case, right, I seen one particular article in the Plymouth Herald, big headline saying, council threaten to anyone that challenges this notice may be liable for costs. Yeah. So in other words, if you take us on, we're going to bill you. Right? They
did that between the window of the notice going up and the 21-day period of it ending. Deliberate.
It was a threat. Total
of course it was. You still got 55 people doing it, though.
Yeah, good for them. Good for you.
And let me get this.
That threat has been carried out, hasn't it? Because now they've now hit you with 8 grand, now rising to 12. Did you say
14? So
14. Okay.
Yeah, because of the judicial review and that. But the thing is, it's really interesting that the letters I proved via the ICO and HMCTS. What happened with the letters is really interesting. Not only was it their shut-off point to try and make sure that nobody got through the net so that there was no court case because they hadn't made the decision properly and therefore it wouldn't be exposed and it would become Jack Leslie Square, blah, blah. What happened was the letters themselves, the 54 letters, bear in mind that 4 of them came from Conservative councils, including Nick Kelly, the leader. Those letters were scanned in by the court, unredacted, and then sent back to Linda Tawney at the council 2 days later. After they'd been rejected, they were scanned in and unredacted. So in the first case management hearing on September the 11th, I said to Judge Matson, I want a copy of those letters. She ordered the council to give me a copy of those letters. What did the council do before they sent them? They redacted them for data protection. And I'm like,
because you sent me some of those emails that were a result of the FOI, and there was quite a few emails in there. Like, some of them were quite revealing, but one of them talking about requesting that the council turn Plymouth purple in remembrance of George Floyd. It was crazy. With seeing how they communicate with each other is insane. But insane. But what struck me was the amount of redaction in those emails, especially the who it was sent by. That was hidden. The subject matter was hidden. And there's quite a few emails which were redacted. I mean, what was the reasoning behind that? And can't you apply for that information to be revealed?
I tried, but Matson stopped it. And I was saying the council have now got an unfair advantage and the court has breached data protection. Those 54 people, including Nick Kelly, wrote to the court. They didn't write to the council.
And they revealed the names of all them 54 people.
Yeah. And I still to this day don't know who the rest of those people are. I know about 6 of them because those people wrote to me on email or phoned me.
Sorry. So the 54 people, their names were redacted.
Yeah, but not to the council.
But not to the council.
No, where the council got them unredacted 2 days after they were rejected by the court in a PDF sent by the court. Here's the letters we rejected. But by the way,
so what do you think? What do you think was their strategy there to redact the names of those 54 to stop you getting allies?
Yes, of course. I was saying to the judge, they've got an advantage. They know the names of these 54 people who are on my side. I don't.
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's not equality of arms.
What scummy,
I said it's a data protection breach. I said
scummy, pathetic people.
Of course,
unbelievable.
And I'd said in court, I said, Judge Matson, this is a data protection breach, and I prove it. By the time we had the judgment on the 4th, she said, "Any business before I go into my judgment?" "Yes, Your Honour." The ICO have written to me and HMCTS, and they've both accepted and said that it was a data protection breach. The letters being sent by the court back to the council, and she was like, "Oh, very well."
Yeah, but she's saying, what are you going to do about it, isn't she? That's all.
Of course,
they will break the rules all day long if nobody is holding them accountable, you know.
And that's where we're at now. Because
see it in court, where we're at now, exactly.
Because of the drafting of her case dated appeal, I wasn't happy with it, so I judicially reviewed that case dated at the High Court.
So she's come back. So you did a case dated.
Yeah, I did a case dated.
Which you appealed, appealed her decision. She's responded to that, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what are you doing with that response?
Well, that's what I did. Rather than lay it at the court and High Court, I judicially reviewed her drafting of the case dated because she was deliberately ignoring the decision was not on the table. The decision was never disclosed. So how could she make a judgment? I applied to the High Court. You were saying
she was in error, that she was biased?
Yes, massively.
Have you used bias? Yeah.
She was. I found out off a solicitor a few months ago because of my involvement in the Finlay Coffee case that the solicitor turned around to me and said, "Danny, you do realise the only reason that Matson was brought in was to deal with you. Deal with me, little old me." Awesome. So I JR'd her drafting of that appeal. And then the JR gets thrown out by a Welsh High Court judge for being filed 5 days too late when it was actually filed 4 days too early.
So they didn't throw it out on substance; they threw it out on an alleged technicality.
Yeah. So now I'm literally at the Court of Appeal, and this is
so how do you get to the Court of Appeal? Are you appealing the JR at the Court of Appeal?
Yes, I'm appealing the decision not to allow the JR because the decision at the magistrate's court was wrong because there was no decision to analyse or appeal against. And then the JR is ignored on a technicality when actually the High Court stamp says the 1st of July. And they're saying that I filed it on the 9th.
It's another labyrinth, isn't it? It's another court labyrinth for you, Danny. So if the Court of Appeal rule in your favour, have you made an application to the Court of Appeal?
I've made 2.
I've made
2 applications. I've made an appeal.
Which is the highest court. Which is the highest court in the land. Yeah.
Second highest.
Supreme Court. Sorry. If the Court of Appeal find in your favour, what would that mean?
It will mean the signs have got to go back up straight away. So
no, wouldn't it mean that? No, but aren't you asking for the Court of Appeal to order the Judicial Review Court to consider your case before anything else?
Yeah, but I'm also asking the Court of Appeal to make 2 important orders to obligate the council to do 2 very important things. You see, under Section 18 of the Public Health Act, when somebody like me, a member of the public, appeals a decision made by a council, especially under Section 18 in terms of road names, they can't execute any works while there's an ongoing appeal. So by taking down the signs on June the 8th before the appeal started, they were instantly in breach of Section 18 of the Public Health Act that says you can't execute any works while there's an ongoing appeal.
But aren't they saying it's in the public interest because those signs are threatened by
yes, of course, that's their
vandalism?
excuse. But the other thing is you've got to realise this. The reason why road signs...
Isn't it a valid excuse?
Well, no, it's not. Because the reason why road signs are under and road naming are under the Public Health Act is because Section 19 obligates all local authorities and city councils who are in control of the roads. They are obligated, statutory obligated, to make sure all road names and signs are in the right place, the right time, and are legible. That's their statutory obligation as public servants to make sure that road signs are there and people can read them. And that makes sense because if somebody has a medical episode over the last 525 days in Sir John Hawkins Square and they phone up the ambulance, I'm having a heart attack. Where are you? Fucking no, I've got a clue. And actually they don't know. Say they're a visitor from Plymouth. They have a heart attack in Sir John Hawkins Square. They're not going to know where they are. Are the emergency services going to get there on time? Because they can't find the square because they don't know where it is because it's not signposted. That's why.
In Liverpool, you have one of the most famous road signs in the world, which is Penny Lane. Mm-hmm. Penny Lane road sign was originally on this big sandstone curved wall, but it kept getting stolen. Right? Cool. Tourists used to turn up and just take it as a souvenir. Yeah. So in the end, the council had to paint the sign onto the sandstone wall. Yeah, and that was the only way that they could stop.
And that's interesting because Section 19, if anybody vandalises or takes down a road sign, there's a fine of £1 per day. But the local authority themselves are the only
taking it down.
No, they took it down, but they're the only people allowed to prosecute under that legislation. So the police,
wouldn't they prosecute themselves for taking the signs down?
They're not going to do that, are they? I mean, Charles Perrott, the chief executive.
Can't you do a private prosecution against the local authority for taking the signs down?
Only the council can prosecute you.
Right, okay.
It's insane. Yeah. So I went to the police and said, look, they're breaking the law. And they went, yeah, but the council are the prosecutors. So...
Okay, so where we're up to with the story is that you're waiting on a result from the Court of Appeal one way or another. Until then, there's no more issues on court. But I do believe that you were involved with the police, making a complaint to the police, asking them to investigate a crime related to this and the Labour Party. Tell us about that and how successful you were getting the police to do the job.
Well, I haven't been very successful yet, to be fair, but I got there. I managed to have an hour with a quite high-profile police officer in Plymouth and tell him all about it. And we went through it, and he got it. And it's now...
What was the complaint? What was the criminal complaint that you made? The criminal
complaint was conspiracy to pervert the course of public justice. But now we know there's no decision. Right now, they know they never made a proper delegated decision. The whole court case is a fraud. Right, so you've got other things to bring in now, which I've made a further complaint last week. Obviously, when all this came out, and when we found out there was no delegated decision, the crimes involved between people like Linda Tawney, who's now taken early retirement 2 weeks ago.
Just remind me who Linda Tawney.
Linda Tawney was the monitoring officer and second in command for the legal team. She's the woman at the council was responsible for the bundle, getting the witnesses' statements together from Jane Hirons and Chris Penberthy, and making sure that Mark Lowry didn't make one. Right. So
conveniently, she's now out of the line of fire.
Well, she's not out of the line of fire because she might have left, but her actions while she was in that post as a public servant.
So you're making an allegation. You're making an allegation that she conspired to.
Yes. And now we know there was
evidence
no decision
from the bundle.
Yes. Yeah. Now we know there was no decision made, and that's why it was not in the bundle because they hadn't.
So you've made that allegation to the police, which is a criminal complaint
in July,
and Did you produce evidence to support your allegation?
I did, and now I've produced even more evidence to show. Look, I've been saying the decision was Mark Lowry's email on the 11th to the police, which is why they didn't disclose it in court, because it showed they breached their policy. That right there is conspiracy to pervert the course of public justice. But having no decision and going to court and having a sham trial and people going in a witness statement and witness statements and going on under oath and stuff.
All this over a road change name?
Mate, it's mad. You've got, think about it, you've got the crimes I've now reported and made an official complaint to the police include misconduct in public office, perjury, fraud, contempt of court, perverting the course of public justice, and perjury. Yeah, I mean, they're all there. They're all there. And they say, don't they? It's not a
lot of the time, it's not the actual crime itself that's the problem. It's the covering up of the crime is when more crimes are committed that compound the issue.
Yeah, and then you've got
like the council are covering up from this, fatal error they made at the beginning of this entire sham.
And then you've got this: who touched the tar baby? Who knew? Who knew about this stuff? And so,
and what did the police say to you?
Well, they basically said we need to see Linda Tawney's emails between these dates, and I said I made an FOI request for them in March, and they were like, "Oh, great! What did they say?" I said we got this weird response from Linda Tawney, so we asked for Linda Tawney's emails, and guess who responded on whatdottheyknow.com? Linda Tawney herself, which is a complete massive conflict of interest. The ICO were going, she can't do that. She's not allowed to do that, right? So she said, she wrote this reply to a Freedom of Information request in March. She dated it the 19th of May, and she uploaded it on the 28th of July. I had my meeting with the cops on the 29th. So that when the cop turned around and said, I worked it out, Donny. The smoking gun is in Linda Tawney's emails between these dates. I said, yeah, I know. I did that FOI request 4 months ago.
But can't the police just demand that those emails are produced rather than you having to do an FOI if it's part of a criminal investigation?
If they started one, but they have not started a criminal investigation. They've not given.
So they need the smoking gun before they can.
They're waiting for the ICO,
and the council aren't going to give up the smoking gun, are they, without a fight?
No, and this is the thing. And I've gone back to the cops and said, I don't know why we're looking for a decision because it doesn't exist.
What about asking for a whistleblower in Plymouth City Council to provide you with any of those things in case they're watching this podcast?
Well, as I said at the beginning, that we're no longer under a Labour council because Nick Kelly is now in charge. And Nick Kelly knows all of this. And now they won't investigate. And now I know why.
A weird little incestuous town, that isn't it?
Nick Kelly is in control of the ship now, isn't he? And he might be a conservative. He might have come to all my hearings. Yeah. But
why would the Conservatives continue? Because you'd expect the Tories to be, like pro-Drake and all that shit, right?
You would, why would not. You? Well, they are. They're not.
So they're continuing the decision by the Labour Party to change that name rather than reversing it.
They are going to be forced to put those signs back up soon. They are now.
Yeah, but regardless of your position enforcing them politically as a Conservative Party, why wouldn't they just say, we're not going to complete the Labour Party's decision on this? Why would they continue this, do you think?
They are in damage limitation. Nick is such a nice guy that he does not want this bad shit to happen on his watch. And it didn't.
You think he's scared of BLM?
I don't think he's scared of BLM. I think he's scared of the email that I was sent the other day that I've got to be patient. There are a number of factors involved here. There are. When you think about it, the signs they put in the box, which is the museum, which shows their intention. They were never going to come out. Now they've got to take the signs out, put them back on the wall. And the irony in all of this, the Sir John Hawkins Square signs are on the side of the Magistrates' Court because the Magistrates' Court is Sir John Hawkins Square. So when I was in that court, I'm like talking about a sign on the side of the
outside the door. Amazing.
And the woman, Susan Bauman, bless her, the court manager, chief legal advisor, whatever she is, She emailed me, and she didn't know that the Plymouth City Council had taken the signs down. She went out after I told her the signs had been removed. She went out and checked and came back and can't believe it. The signs have gone, Danny. Don't worry, Susan. Batman's on the case.
So, okay, Dan, we're going to start wrapping this up now. So, in terms of where we are right now, the ball's in the court. You're in a reactive position. There's nothing you can do until you get a result there, correct?
Yeah, correct, yeah.
Yeah. You've got a potential police investigation unfolding, depending on whether you can bring more evidence to the table. Yeah,
the ICO are investigating. The local government ombudsman are investigating. The Labour Party legal team were going to investigate, but because the police haven't started
investigating... So what were they going to investigate? What were the Labour Party going to investigate?
Labour Party were going to investigate breach of councillor code of conduct by Councillor Lowry and Chris Penberthy.
And
that's what I reported to the monitoring officer at Plymouth City Council, which was Linda Tawney, and she sat on it for 5 months, and then it went to the Cornwall Council's monitoring officer, Simon Mansell, OBE, who turned around and said that can't be a decision by Mark Lowry on the 11th because it's not delegated and it's not properly published and it's not on their website.
So there's an internal Labour Party investigation currently, or has that been halted or what?
Labour Party have given me a reference number for the investigation. They have told me they have started an investigation, and they came back to me and said, have you informed the police? Because these are criminal charges. Yeah, these are criminal. Yes, I have. Oh, well, we won't investigate. This is them coming back to me. We won't investigate while the police are investigating. So we'll hold fire while the police are investigating. That's what they came back to me. So I go back to them and say, actually, the police have not yet actually officially started a proper investigation. They're considering whether to investigate. So the Labour Party investigations team come back and say, well, if the police aren't investigating, neither will we.
Well, yeah, fair enough. We can understand. They don't really want to do an internal investigation exposing, their own party, do they? Unless, it's a serious one.
It's all going to come out. It's all going to come out.
So the police one is currently in a bit of limbo. They haven't refused to investigate. They've just put the ball in your court and said, go and get us some more evidence, Dan.
They said to me 3 weeks ago, we'll review this if you can get some new evidence about these emails or the decision, whatever. And then I find out there's no decision.
Is there a fairness? Is there a fairness in the basement of Plymouth City Council currently incinerating all of these shady documents that expose them? Yeah,
it's a bit late now.
I think what's incredible from this is the fact that if this is what they're prepared to do over something as trivial as changing a name of a street, if these are the lengths that they're prepared to go to for something like that, what else are they doing that we don't know about behind our backs? I think we can presume it's pretty hardcore what they're getting up to, because there is no public group or authority that are pushing back against this. And I think that's one of the things that I respect about you most, Danny, right, is that you're just one man who's decided to say, you know what, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge, the council, the police, the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, BLM, Antifa, and you're just one man on your own. And what it demonstrates is the power of the individual. Because look at the damage that you're doing. Look at the damage that you're doing. And it's even if you don't get the victory, I'm sure you are. You're made for the job. You're made for the job, right? And they will know that. They will have a dossier on you, because this is not the first time you've engaged in these type of challenges.
I did a subject access data request on them, right? And they wrote back last week and they said, we're going to need 3 months to do your subject access data request. Because we've been to every department in the council and they've all got stuff on you, Danny.
They've all got a file on you. I say, I want a compiled dossier, please. I want to know everything. But see, that's the thing, is the power of the individual is a lot, more effective than we actually realize, because they want to demoralize us. They want to demoralize us into inaction, so we don't do anything because we think, what's the point? I'm just one man. And I think you demonstrate and it's so inspiring for other people, I think, is what you can actually do. Because even if you don't get the victory that you want, and even if they do change the name, you haven't done it without a fight.
No, they're not going to. They're not.
But even in a worst case scenario, in an alternate universe, right, if that happens, at least that they have been pushed hard, and a lot of their corruption has been exposed. And I absolutely commend you for it, Danny. And I hope we can follow this story to its conclusion, to the victory that we're all going to celebrate.
Well, yeah, because even if I have to do a private prosecution, the evidence now that I've got against them is overwhelming. It's compelling. And I really think that in the near future, that certain people are going to be arrested for this, what they've done. And they might be retired. They might be working counsellors. And then it will make the news. They won't be able to avoid it then.
Well, I think you've had quite good news coverage so far. I mean, that the Mail have followed it. It's a lot of articles in the Plymouth Herald. Yeah. And, I think if you do get a result, and I hope you do, and I think you will, then other councils, other government bodies, other agencies will think twice about appeasing a terrorist organisation.
Well, that's it. And if the alteration argument gets past the case dated, because you've got to remember, the JR will bring everything back to the alteration argument. That's what the JR will do. It will also then incorporate the fact that the council never made the decision, and I appealed fresh air, as you said earlier, and lost. Yeah. So that's the key, is the alteration argument really could put the spanner in the works. Like, what's the mayor of London called?
Can't.
Yeah. So he's just given £1 million to loads of London boroughs to start renaming roads like Black Boy Lane and all this stuff. And the one in Dorset, Dark Lane. I mean, really, it's insane. Yeah. So alteration argument in the High Court that could create case law, Bamping versus Plymouth City Council. I love that. Yeah. But it could. And it'll be determined saying you can't change an existing road name, you can't rename it, you can only alter it.
Well, the thing is about, in the legal world, words are everything, and definitions are very, very important, because you need certainty in the legal world. And if you haven't got certainty, then that's where disputes arise, and that's where the court steps in. That's why we have definitions, in legal definitions.
Yeah.
So you need it stated on the record so that there aren't any other disputes like this in the future.
Exactly.
Who has the power to change the name roads? The name of roads?
No one's had the power.
Well, someone must have it somewhere, whether it's the government or whether it's the Queen.
The certainty. They can change. They can change. They can give a road that doesn't have a name, but they can only alter an existing road name. They can't change or rename it. That's the point.
Okay. So, and then hopefully we will get a legal definition.
Yes.
A judgment on the definition of alteration, and that would give us certainty about what we can do.
Because they needed certainty for road names. That's why we need certainty, and that's the key here, is having a judgment that then stops councils from going to try and change and rename existing roads when actually they don't have the power to do it within the legislation. It's really interesting, the wording, because the 54 letters were rejected because they didn't use the word appeal, right? And this is but they all have the same intention as I did.
Well, that's equity, isn't it? So the law is black and white, but equity is the shades of grey. So in reality is that those people who were objecting believe they were appealing, but because they didn't have the correct wording, it's a technicality, and that shouldn't stand, because justice should see through that.
Yes. Yeah? But imagine if I didn't put the word appeal, there would have been no appeal. It would
be over, wouldn't it? Yeah, it'd be over, wouldn't it? It wouldn't even be getting argued.
And this is the thing, is that Jack Leslie is going to have a bronze statue outside Home Park pretty soon, and they're going to put it on an unnamed road.
But the thing is, Jack Leslie is being used as a political pawn.
Yes.
Right? That's what's terrible about it. He's being used as a political pawn, and they're sullying his name by trying to use him in this manner. The Plymouth Argyle are doing great things for Jack Leslie, naming the boardroom after him, building a statue. Right? They're the correct ways to honour Jack Leslie, the fourth highest goal scorer in Plymouth Argyle's history.
And why not
be used as a political football?
Yeah. Why not re-maintain the road? Take responsibility of the road where they are. Relay it with some nice tarmac because it looks a mess, and give it the name. They could have named it Jack Leslie Way. That would have been perfect. But now it's going to be Paul Mariner Way or Mariner Way because Paul Mariner just died, and somebody went to Paul Mariner's family before asking permission for it to be a nomination because somebody knew what the rules were. So Mariner's Way would be perfect because it doesn't. You don't actually need you don't have to need the permission of the family because you're not putting the word Paul there. Yeah. And it's a Mariners city, so it makes sense. Mariners Way, and Paul Mariner was Plymouth Argyle's most famous footballer, England international. And when they played Ipswich the other week, Paul Mariner's family came to that game and met Nick Kelly. And I'd already sent the email to everybody about naming it Mariners Way. So hopefully they had a conversation with Simon Hallett, the chairman of the Plymouth Argyle, to look at maintaining that road, relaying it with some nice flash tarmac, whatever, and giving it a name that is synonymous to the city and to the football club. It makes sense. But Jack Leslie will never have his name on a road or a square in Plymouth ever.
Okay, Danny, wrapping it up on that profound note, if people want to find you, support you, where can they find you?
Well, I'm on YouTube as The Public Detective. My website is my name, so dannybamping.com. And they can find me in Plymouth in a big house with 2 cats and a dartboard.
Very good. Okay. Well, listen, I'll put all that stuff below in the description so people can catch up. But yeah, Danny, as always, it's an honor and a pleasure chatting to you. I look forward to being updated on this case. Come to us first when you have something definitive to share with us. And just wish you the best of luck. And I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Okay, Dan. See you
later.
Cheers, dude.